In the land of Kishan lived a hard-working teenage boy called Alibaba Saluja. One day while working for his employer, he finds a kid nonchalantly eating from their goods. The kid reveals that he is Aladdin, a traveler. However, Alibaba snaps at him. When the inspector called Budel arrives, he finds Aladdin still eating, so Alibaba apologizes on his behalf. Budel gets angry and pins the blame on Alibaba. Later that night, Alibaba complains, wishing how his problems would be solved if he could clear a dungeon. When Aladdin asks, he explains that dungeons are mysterious structures that started appearing all over the world 14 years ago. He also adds that whoever clears the dungeon gets all its riches, magic items as well as metal jinn vessels. The next day, despite his best efforts, Aladdin still clings to him. To satisfy his curiosity, Alibaba shows him the location of the dungeon, called Ammon, which no one has come back from alive. In town they bump into a red-haired girl who pays them no attention. When Aladdin finds that she is a slave, he breaks her chain with a blow from his flute. However, everyone just gets agitated as this means he wants to steal the slave. The noise attracts Budel and his men and he soon starts maltreating the girl. This angers Aladdin, so he calls out his jinn called Hugo, who handles the handful of enemies. Upon seeing that Aladdin possesses a jinn, Alibaba tries to indirectly bribe him into accompanying him. Luckily, Aladdin made a promise to Hugo to rally his fellow jinn from the dungeon. Outside, Budel comes with an offer for Alibaba. He has to either pay what he owes, become a wanted criminal, or he can become a slave and work off his debt. Alibaba kindly accompanies Budel's caravan and they find the girl in chains recaptured. In the desert, they are suddenly attacked by a hyacinth who is attracted to the grapevine cargo. In the attack, a child is saved by the red-haired girl, and thanks to Budel, they both fall into the monster's clutches. Alibaba watches in despair as they struggle and prays for someone to save them. But when Budel rants about his wine and promises to pay for the soon-to-be-dead slaves, Alibaba punches him in the face. He dives into the pit and begins a fruitless effort to rescue the girls. Aladdin then calls out Hugo, who assists him in feeding the monster wine. This calms it down, although not enough for him to rescue the girls. In the dire moment, he gets taken in their place. Aladdin quickly summons his magic turban and feeds the monster with more wine so that he gets drunk. Afterward, the two head to town in hopes of clearing the dungeon. At the entrance of the dungeon, Alibaba hesitates, and knowing the dangers, he gives Aladdin one last chance to stay behind. However, Aladdin collapses and they both unwillingly go through the gateway, which transports them into the dungeon. Immediately Aladdin wakes up. He notices the river is flammable, so he rescues Aladdin before they get burnt. With help from Hugo, they manage to clear another level by outrunning a boulder. Here, Alibaba notices Aladdin looking pale and tired, so he explains that he is hungry and needs strength to draw out his magic. They soon encounter an insect colony, so Alibaba begins to battle them. However, they suddenly merge to form a giant fire-breathing monster. Aladdin then summons Hugo and feeds him with enough magic to annihilate the monster using his powered fists. This trick makes Aladdin collapse afterward, leaving Alibaba to care for him. Later, they soon find the red-haired girl called Morgiana along with Lord Jamil and his handyman Goltaz. Lord Jamil addresses Aladdin as a Magi and abducts him while asleep. When Alibaba protests, he orders Goltaz to kill him. Luckily, Alibaba outsmarts Goltaz, leaving Lord Jamil disappointed so much that he decides to discard his weak, useless slave. Seeing the cruel way Goltaz is treated, Alibaba decides to play along and cooperate with the Lord. For the next trial, Alibaba is surprisingly able to translate the language on the tablet, so he is sent to test out his translation. He dances around the pillars of fire and successfully hits the off switch on the other side. However, he is consumed by another flame so that nothing is left of his remains. After a while, Aladdin wakes up and is left in the care of Morgiana. At first, she refuses to indulge Aladdin, but after much effort, she begins to open up about her origins. Alibaba suddenly appears from the roof and reveals that he lied about the translation. He then takes Aladdin on the flying turban to escape. As they move, Morgiana begins chasing them with her strong legs, but they manage to escape her crutches, barely. The pair arrive in front of a giant door which they open together to reveal a vast city called a necropolis. It turns out Lord Jamil's group also got transported into the necropolis, but he continues to punish Morgiana for her incompetence. In the treasure room, they encounter an injured Goltaz and Morgiana, who sends Aladdin flying with a kick. Lord Jamil, confident in his swordplay, confronts Alibaba in hopes of humiliating him for his defiance. As soon as the battle begins, Alibaba's skills turn out to be superior to his own. After being knocked down, it gets clear to him that Alibaba practices real royal swordplay. He then calls on Morgiana, who dashes in an instant to protect him. Although Alibaba tries to convince her to ditch her good-for-nothing master, she refuses and punishes him for dropping his guard. Morgiana is then handed a sword and ordered to kill Alibaba, but she hesitates for a second, which fortunately allows Aladdin to interfere. Aladdin then requests for his flute, and when he is refused, he controls the magic particles around called Ruck as a form of attack. Confident in Morgiana's finale's ability, he sends her to subdue Aladdin, but she is simply confined by his magic. Suddenly, magic circles appear, and out of them emerges the djinn of the dungeon. He scans through those present to pick his king candidate, but then he notices and bows to Aladdin as the Magi. Hugo then emerges from the flute and helps the pair negotiate with his fellow djinn called Ammon, the Master of Flames. When Ammon refers to Aladdin as a Magi yet again, Aladdin demands an explanation, so he is told that a Magi is a magician who chooses the right king for the people as they possess the wisdom of Solomon. Just then, the dungeon begins to collapse due to an external interference, so Ammon creates a portal for the group to escape. Alibaba begs Morgiana to come with them and leave her master behind, but she wants to demonstrate blind loyalty. However, Golta stops her and reveals he and their master deserve to be punished for their evil doings. He frees her of her bounds, and so she leaves together with the pair. On returning to the human realm, Alibaba is hailed for clearing the dungeon while the others are transported to different locations. After a few days, Aladdin pays off his debt to Butel and also used his treasures to free the slaves under Lord Jamal, and this includes Morgiana. Meanwhile, Aladdin is taken in by a caravan, where he meets an old lady who tells him that the Ruks are souls of the dead. Outside, it turns out Aladdin was rescued by the Kuga clan. The next day, Hakui Ren, a daughter of the Ku Emperor, arrives at the settlement for diplomatic talks. She asks the clan leader to come under the Ku Empire and reveals they have the grand goal of uniting the whole world. The peaceful talk soon goes southwards when a villager is assaulted by Ryasai, a fellow diplomat. He then declares the village to be under the control of the Ku Empire and insults their crude lifestyle. This angers Dolge, making him attack, but he stops halfway so as not to trigger a war. At night, Aladdin goes to beg the princess not to kill the villagers who he has grown to love. This makes her swear not to harm everyone, as it is also her intent to avoid bloodshed. That night, the clansmen embark on a chase after a group who abducted the girls from the village. The group led by Dolge manages to catch up with the kidnappers, avoid their attack, overpower them, and rescue their families without killing anyone. After the group arrives together happily, the Grand Elder reveals it will be best to surrender to the Ku Empire to save their lives. But when she goes out alone to ease her mind on the fields, she is struck down by an arrow. At the same time, a soldier from the Ku Empire is also reported to be attacked by the Kuga clan. This makes Ryasai advise the princess to retaliate, but she chooses to confirm their hostility herself, even if it meant leaving the troops in his command. Later, it is revealed that Ryasai planned the entire situation just to trigger the war. En route to dialogue with the settlement, the princess and her aide are ambushed by the angry villagers. Even when she is struck, she stands still to prove her resolve. Just then, the Elder arrives to calm the situation and pledges allegiance to the Ku Empire. Eventually, the Elder dies from her injuries and her spirit appears to Aladdin, admonishing him that he isn't alone as long as he is one with the Ruk, which represents millions of souls. Meanwhile, the princess on her way back encounters her army under the command of Ryasai marching to war. Ryasai decides to kill the princess and use her death as an excuse to wipe out the Kuga clan, so he orders his men to attack her. However, their arrows suddenly stop and she is revealed to wield a djinn. While Seishan takes care of Ryasai's men, the princess merges with her djinn called Payman. She uses all of her remaining strength to annihilate her foes in a tornado attack, but it turns out Ryasai had more men hiding. She gets captured by Ryasai but still manages to engage him in a fair duel. However, she is fired at from different angles and severely wounded. In her dire moment, Aladdin arrives and moves to destroy the remaining soldiers. When Aladdin makes contact with her fan, the djinn Payman materializes, and although Hugo talks to her, she reveals she only cares about Hakui, who has been chosen by the Magi of the Ku Empire as a king candidate. While recalling the words from Hugo telling him to explore the world and discover himself, Aladdin boards the caravan in hopes of finding Alibaba. After some time, Morgiana finds herself helping to rescue some slaves in the desert. Here she finds Aladdin among the people captured. He explains that his caravan had an accident, so he lost consciousness only to later wake up in chains. After getting his flute back, he drives the slave traders away with Hugo. Since he and Morgiana are acquaintances with the travelers, they decide to travel to a city called Balbad in search of Alibaba. In a forest, three brothers stumble on a rich dude who passed out from being drunk, so they steal from him. After parting ways with the caravan, Aladdin and Morgiana find themselves in the forest. Here they find the rich man but naked with a smile on his face. He later explains that he was robbed and introduces himself as Sin. Together they arrive at the port nation of Balbad surrounded by the ocean. Sin leads them to a hotel but is quickly harassed for his looks. Luckily his aides sort out the misunderstanding. Later, it is revealed that Sin is actually short for Sinbad, the powerful king of Sindria. When Sinbad requests that the trade route to his nation be reopened, the king reveals that the issue lies with a band of thieves called the Fog Troop, who carry out their crimes under the cover of the city's fog. It is added that the thieves only rob nobles and also redistribute the treasures stolen to the townsfolk. As a result, the people hail them as heroes. It is also revealed that the group has a new powerful leader known as Alibaba the Miracle Man. With this said, Sinbad decides to take care of the fog troop himself. During lunch, Sinbad introduces Jafar and Masra to Aladdin and Morgiana. He also reveals that Morgiana and Masra are from the same Rear Finale's tribe. When Aladdin lets Hugo out, Sinbad is surprised he is a Magi. He then introduces himself as a man who has conquered 7 dungeons and jinns, but Aladdin isn't really moved. Later, they join forces and begin concocting a plan to apprehend the fog troop. At night, the new group split into 2 to be stationed as guards at the troop's potential targets. Soon Sinbad's group encounters a hostile woman who reveals she wants food as she cannot produce milk to feed her baby. The noble, on seeing the people from the slums, tosses a piece of meat onto the street for them. Sinbad then stops the lady from picking it up and allows them to carry on as long as they don't kill anybody. Meanwhile, Aladdin's groups encounter a red mist that makes people hallucinate. They manage to avoid it and soon find the source to be a woman called Zainab. Her ally called Hassan also utilizes a corroding sword to effectively break down the mansion's fence. Although Jafar moves to stop them, he is immobilized by black fog from another user called Qasim. When Morgiana interferes, she is also restrained by the black fog despite her best efforts. As a last measure, Aladdin summons Hugo onto the scene, and so the group's leader steps in and reveals himself to be Alibaba. He goes to meet Alibaba, reminding him of their promise of adventure, but is disappointed as Alibaba tells him he cannot keep their promise. Later, it turns out Qasim and Alibaba are sincerely fighting to make sure the people don't starve to death. He finds Morgiana in his room and she requests an explanation. When he proves headstrong, she takes him away by force. At the same time, Jafar reports that Balbad's economic decline is majorly a result of the paper money being circulated by the Ku Empire. Morgiana brings Alibaba to Aladdin, but instead of explaining, they engage in cold, small talks. After catching up, Alibaba begins narrating his childhood story with Qasim. His father abused him and his sister, so Alibaba's mother took them in after he disappeared. Soon after, Alibaba's mother died of illness, so Qasim took it upon himself to do dirty jobs to take care of them. One day, the king of Balbad took him in, claiming to be his father. After some time confined in the luxurious palace, Alibaba manages to sneak out to the slums again. He found out the slums had been cleared and met Qasim. They began hanging out, and while drunk, he revealed the secret passage to the palace to him. On the king's dying bed, he passed the throne to Alibaba instead of his dull elder brother, Ahmad. That night, Qasim and his group raided the palace treasury and set it ablaze afterward. He finishes his story by stating the incident to be the reason he ran away from home. After returning to Balbad, he met Qasim, who opened his eyes to the wrongs of the government and how they let Maryam, his sister, die. After the story, Aladdin promises to help him take his country back, but at that moment, Qasim and his men break into the hotel. They begin engaging Sinbad and his aides, but Sinbad is more than capable of defending himself well without his jinns. They catch up with Qasim upstairs, where Masra knocks down half of Qasim's men with his footwork. Qasim uses the power of his sword to immobilize Sinbad, but he easily nullifies the skill with magic. Sinbad tells Alibaba he is a prince and different from the people of the slum, so he gets angry. He summons Amon's flames, which he combines with his sword play on Sinbad. He succeeds in pushing him back and knocking away Sinbad's sword, so Sinbad drains his flames and knocks him unconscious. After the battle, Sinbad suddenly reveals he is joining the fog troop. Although Alibaba doesn't buy his change of heart, Sinbad convinces him by explaining he wants to contribute to ending the abnormalities in the world, of which the internal strife in Balbad is one. The next day, there's a notice in town revealing that Alibaba is the true heir to the throne of Balbad. Everyone then gathers at the castle in hopes of a change. Inside, Sinbad brings Alibaba to his brother, the king, and here he acknowledges his faults and begs that Ahmed try to make life better for his people. However, Alibaba is captured by the king, who reveals he never considered him a brother since he was born illegitimately. In the commotion, the nation's treasurer arrives and introduces himself as Markio the banker. Another man who Sinbad recognizes as Judel shows up and reveals he is a priest of the Ku Empire. The arrival of his guests makes Ahmed open up to the fact that he handed the trade routes right to the Ku Empire as per the banker's advice. At night, Sinbad helps Alibaba reveal that the negotiations at the palace were fruitless. He also manages to inspire the people into clinging to the hope of better tomorrow. Just then, Judel, who is also a Magi, arrives and reveals he is only interested in promoting war. He notices Aladdin's presence, but even when told, he doesn't believe a child can be a Magi. He attacks Aladdin, and when he finds out Alibaba is his king candidate, he mocks them both even more. Aladdin stands up for Alibaba, but this only makes Judel toy with him. This angers Aladdin, so the two Magi move to a showdown. Sinbad tries to stop the fight, but since he doesn't have his jinn equipped, Judel shuns him. They start shooting Magi, a condensed form of rock, at each other, but they get cancelled out. Judel then switches to a magic attack, so Aladdin has no choice but to summon Hugo. Judel continues his magic show-off and creates icicles which he fires repeatedly from above. Hugo then pulls a point back by smashing Judel to the ground. He comes out unscathed and fires more icicles which Hugo takes with his back to protect Aladdin. This immensely weakens Hugo, who begins leaking out Magi. Judel proves to be an insane war maniac, so Aladdin begs Hugo to save himself, but he doesn't listen. Morgiana retrieves Aladdin while Alibaba confronts Judel with his sword. Although Alibaba is sent flying, this creates an opportunity for Hugo to land a surprise attack. He continues pounding Judel in a blind, terrifying rage that makes him question if he is really Aladdin's djinn. Even with an icicle in his chest, Hugo makes sure to finish off Judel. Hugo creates a shockwave to put a permanent end to Judel while everyone can only watch. He is however saved by his Ku Empire comrades. The princess in their midst then summons her djinn with water powers, but this too doesn't stop Hugo. She then merges with her djinn and uses this form to annihilate Hugo in one strike. Aladdin goes to confront the princess, so she sends her minions down to attack his allies. Nasser, Morgiana, and then Alibaba manage to keep them at bay while the princess faces off with Aladdin. When she moves to merge again, Sinbad stops her transformation by draining her Magi. He introduces himself as a king and sweet-talks his way into making them retreat due to diplomatic reasons. And this brings the anime to an end. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoyed, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss out on another video. Until next time, take care.